Yeah, we're here. We are here. And I gotta set up my recorder here so we are recording. Hey, hi, it's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, I'm up to you. We're usually here around 2 p.m. ish Pacific time. Live, we pop up the secret podcast, not where you regularly get your podcasts, like at you know Castbox, Spotify, those kind of places. This is just literally a secret show that we do live. We just pop up. It's like a Filipino boil. Just pop up like that. Pop up. We just pop up, and we talk about the news. I talk about myself in plural. That's not right. Oh, I'll have my guest today. My usual Friday guest, Doctor Professor Daniel Phil Gonzales. He'll be here to join me in a second. But it's not quite 2 o'clock yet. So this is what I call the lanyap, right? The something extra, where I just talk about what we do here Monday through Friday. We call it WDAAAT. What does an Asian American think? Because they never ask what an Asian American thinks, let alone a Filipino. We fill you in on that score. Yes. So welcome, Emil Amok's Takeout. My takes on all things considerable. That's what we call this. It's a news talk show. Someone said, what kind of show is this? Are there supposed to be punchlines, Emil? I mean, or is it just all premises? Or are you just on the premises? Well, I own the home. It's my premises. But no, I mean, there's sometimes you have to like search for the punchlines. But it's not a punchline oriented show. It's an idea show. It's a feeling show. It's a story kind of show. Putting us in the news, talking about the news, how it affects us. It's news talk. News talk in its most ideal sense. You know, I mean, it's not that polarizing kind of news. I've done that kind of polarizing news talk. You know, where you ask a question and you try to polarize people and you have people fight each other on the air. Now, I've done that. This is more of the conversational news talk, talking about the news, how it affects our lives, to give you a sense of context, right? To the headlines that you hear. That's what this show is about. Anyway, you don't find those kind of shows now because they're all kind of polarized from the right. Very rarely do you hear a left-wing perspective. Very rarely do you hear anything other than a white male perspective. And here you hear an Asian American Filipino perspective on the news, which is different. It's part of the nuance of American diversity, part of the nuance of the new America that you don't hear in the media, which is why social media, even though we've maligned it for some of its failings, and there are a number of failings which require, honestly, it requires regulation. I mean, we had that hearing this week. But social media does provide that democratizing factor that allows these voices out there. That's why Emil Amok's Takeout is here. And, you know, you can listen to it live, be here live, maybe get it accidentally, but, you know, you can find it. You can scroll back. You can do whatever you can manipulate the media on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Emil Amok, on YouTube, youtube.com at Emil Amok 1, EMILAMOK1. Also on Facebook, fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media. We're there. You can catch us. And so let me begin by saying, you know, I do these shows as a way of being out there, of expressing myself as a person who needs expressing. And I then do live shows. And I've got some live shows coming up. You should mark the date. There's a Fringe Festival in Fresno. Now, a friend of mine noted that, hey, you know, the New York Times, the Frugal Traveler said, hey, you should go visit the Central Valley, specifically the Modesto area and possibly Fresno and Selma, the grape capital of the world. And there it was in Wednesday's paper, bragging about the Central Valley. And another good reason to visit the Central Valley is the Fringe Festival, a theater festival in Fresno. It's in March, and I'm in it. Emil, Amok, Lost NPR host, is in it. March 2nd, 2 p.m. March 2nd at 9:30 p.m. Make a whole day out of it. March 3rd at 2 p.m. Make a weekend out of it. And then again, March 7th at 5:30 p.m. and March 9th, Saturday, March 9th, 5:30 p.m. It's or 5 p.m. March 9th, Saturday. The Fresno Fringe, the Rogue Festival. It's fringy in the tradition of the Edinburgh Fringe. The Rogue Festival in Fresno. Catch it March 2nd. Emil Amok, Lost NPR host, is there. Going to be part of it. It's a new iteration. It's always different. It's always like lava, molten lava, right? My shows are like molten lava. And then, that day we shape and we refine. Check it out. Rogue Festival in Fresno. Now, if you say, look, Emil, I'm in Minnesota. I'm not going to go to Fresno. Okay, go to New York City. Go to New York City. Or Emil, I'm in like North Carolina. I'm not going to go to Fresno. Okay, New York City. At the New York City Fringe Festival in April. April 5th, April 8th, April 13th, April 19th, and April 21st. 5 performances at Under St. Mark's. Underground. It's the New York City Fringe. So I'm performing in April, and then I'm performing in May in Orlando at the big Fringe Festival there. No dates yet, but I will be there in May, toward the end, the last couple weeks. Check it out. Emil Amok, Lost NPR host. Okay, so I do this as a way to kind of work out some things or talk about some things that might end up in my shows. And you're just going to have to go to the shows to see if, if that's true. You're just going to have to find out. Okay, today is also February 2nd. The groundhog indicator indicates an early spring. I don't know. Do you believe in that stuff? It's an exploitation of groundhogs. If I had a cup of tea with a groundhog and he told me exactly how he felt, I might have a different opinion. But, Groundhog Day is kind of an exploitation of the groundhog. But it's also, yesterday was the 1st. This is the 2nd day of February. Black History Month. And yesterday, on the first day of Black History Month, a person who was a friend of mine, my regret is that he wasn't a closer friend of mine, but Joe Madison, the Black Eagle on Sirius XM radio, passed away. On social media, his family said it was prostate cancer, or related to, he's been fighting it. He'd been fighting a lot of things, diabetes and prostate cancer, and he'd survived, and then it came back, and he'd been fighting it again, and he succumbed to it yesterday. I just want to say about Joe Madison. I worked with Joe in Washington, D.C. as a talk host, and we were kind of competitive with each other, although he had his own show. He had his own show at noon. I just finished my stint with NPR, and I was working as a kind of the fill-in guy. So guys would be sick, and I would come on. And I was working on a great talk radio station that featured guys like, there was a guy named Joel A. Spivak, who's now passed away, a guy named Morton Downey Jr., who has now passed away. There was a guy named Mark Davis, who's still doing it in Dallas, Texas, I believe. And there was Joe. Joe was great. But when I saw him, he was kind of moving up. He was doing the fill-in stuff, and then he got the regular job, noon to 3. And he had been driving in from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. to do these shows. And he was like in a tracksuit all the time. And I was, filling in, and we were kind of the filling. It was like the typical broadcast mindset. Oh, they have the minority guys, filling in on the weekends or filling in when people are sick. But Joe, so we saw each other kind of as competitors, but we really should have been friends because we were fighting the same battles. We were talking about the same things. We were talking about civil rights issues. He for African Americans, me for Asian Americans, Filipino Americans. And we were, I don't know if it was my ego or his ego, but we were just friendly enough to call each other friends, but not deep enough to call each other friends. And that was my regret because, he's went on to be president of the NAACP, went on to use his radio platform, not just where we were at the time, that radio station, which was a mainstream radio station. Then he went off and joined, I think, a black network, but then transformed that into the gig at Sirius XM and had a national platform as Sirius XM became a leader in satellite radio. And I always thought, God, Joe did it. He hung in. He had his purpose, his focus set, and he made it from this guy who was just doing weekends, driving in from Philadelphia, to a regular gig, to a national gig, to his activism as the NAACP president. And I thought, okay, when I see him again, it's going to be different. We'll remember the old days. And unfortunately, we just never connected again. I tried a couple of times. We missed. And you always say, okay, there's going to be a time. There's going to be a time where we're going to connect. And it never happened. I mean, Joe was 74. And we actually had a lot in common. He went to Washington University in St. Louis. I didn't know that. I find that out now. I didn't go to WashU as an undergrad. I went there as a graduate student. But we could have talked about St. Louis. We had more in common than we thought. And so I was watching the news and I saw the news. Well, actually, I first saw the news about his death on social media. His family announced it. And I couldn't believe it. You just don't know. Is this really true? Is he really? And then a couple clicks. Yeah, it's true. Then I see it announced. Laura Coates, who was a mentee of Joe Madison, talked about him on her show last night. And it was sad, because Joe had prostate cancer. The big news yesterday was General Austin's prostate cancer and how he was secretive and how he regretted that he did not make a public statement or take a public action to warn people about prostate cancer because it does impact African American communities, minority communities, much more than just in general, other, mainstream populations. And so that was, the Austin information, that was always in the background. But then Joe, I see Joe's death and it just hits me. I know one thing, he's big on hunger strikes. He knew the power of diet. He was a friend of Dick Gregory's. And, when I knew him, he was a little chunkier. I wasn't vegan yet. I was vegetarian. And he was trying to change his diet. I remember that. But, this is the thing about Joe. He knew that there was a lot you can do in your life to change the things that happen to your life. Like you don't have to eat all that stuff that makes you sick. You don't have to eat the diet that you think is culturally yours, fried food, that kind of meats. You don't have to go with that. You can eat healthy. You can change your life. He did. And he beat cancer. It came back. It's sad that ultimately he succumbed. He died yesterday at 74. Joe Madison. My regret again. I wish we were closer friends because we fought a lot of the same battles. So, I remember one time he was on at noon and I was doing the 9 to 12 in the morning, filling in for Joel A. Spivak, or one of the morning guys. And you trade off, when you transfer power, peaceful transfer of power between shows. That was always fun. Hey, what's going on, Joey? And it was always fun. Always fun. That's how you got to know people, because that's when you engaged on the air together. Because normally you were just yourself talking to an audience. I have to say that I learned a lot about radio from working with people like Joe, from listening to people like Joe. So when I would hear him subsequently on Sirius XM, I just, like I said, recalled with fondness our days when we worked in the same control room, the same radio station. And my regret today is that we weren't closer friends than we should have been. Rest in peace, Joe Madison. All right, so let's turn to the news. I thought, Fridays is usually when I talk about the news with my friend Daniel Phil Gonzales, who I've known for a long time, professor, San Francisco State University, College of Ethics Studies, one of the original strikers that brought on ethics studies in America, right? And so there are a couple of things I want to talk to him. One of the premier ones is what's going on in the Philippines with Rodrigo Duterte and the current president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Let me bring on Daniel Phil Gonzales. Hi, Dan.
Hi, how's it going, man?
Hey,
Thanks
pretty
for
good.
having me on.
Hey, no problem. You're the first one I think of when I think about Fridays, because we're gonna have Dan on. What are we gonna talk about? And the big thing now is, we're both Filipino American, and we're American first, but we look back at what's going on in the Philippines because that's important. And now we have Duterte, Rodrigo Duterte, the past president, and the current president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., battling and bickering over drug allegations. On the surface, Marcos is saying that Rodrigo Duterte is on fentanyl, and Rodrigo Duterte has admitted that. And Duterte has said that, Bong Bong, he's using dope. So what's going on? Why are they squabbling?
It actually, you could take your pick from a whole list of reasons that they're doing that embarrassing activity,
Yeah,
and it really all goes back to just the first month after their win back in 22. I can't believe it's already almost 2 years. But what happened initially was there was an ongoing somebody filed in the ICC, right,
right,
International Court, Criminal Court, and an investigation into the so-called drug war
right.
by the Duterte administration in the
Right.
Philippines.
The
That got started.
yeah, the extrajudicial killings, and which number in the thousands, the
Yes,
tens of thousands, and
depending on whose measurement you trust, right?
yeah,
And if you go with Amnesty International, which is pretty good, I mean,
Mm.
it's in the double 20,000 or more.
Yeah. And here's the thing: the ICC did rule. There were verdicts against Duterte,
Yes,
but but nothing happened because is it because the Philippines didn't subscribe to the ICC or because
that's part of it. The the volunteers or the people who go to the ICC have to be volunteers. They have to be members. Okay, and so you have to look to either international policing like Interpol,
Mm,
um, because like UN decisions, right? If they make any kind of decisions, whether it's court based or Security Council, any of that stuff, in
mm,
order for it to be enforced, there has to be cooperation from national agencies or courts or police, whatever. And if they don't have that, if that doesn't exist, then all you have is bare decisions, right?
so
It
yeah,
would be the equivalent of our Supreme Court not having the ability to mobilize the arrest and imprisonment police powers of the DOJ.
so
Okay,
so in other words, the ICC found Duterte guilty, but they weren't able to enforce.
yeah, I don't know if they found him specifically guilty, but they said that in fact there were violations, right? Which is pretty easy to prove, right?
Right.
And then the
Thousands of
question
killings.
question was whether or not his administration had uh, encouraged or even ordered those kinds of killings to occur, and that's of course the soft spot, whether or not you can prove that.
Yeah.
So in this instance, they could have been able to go forward. And now, to bring it up to date, uh, in the intervening 2 years, Marcos, I still call him Bongbong, and I still call him Junior.
Yeah.
But
Bong bong.
Junior went ahead and said that he wanted to join the ICC. So that's a major problem between him and Rodrigo Senior. Then there were a series of conflicts around U.S. policy because I was not surprised because his father, of course, Ferdinand Marcos Sr., had depended on U.S. support
Mhm.
for his entire 19-year period, right, of
Yeah.
rule in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And it only fell apart when after the assassination of Benigno Aquino, right? It was deteriorating even as early as 1980-81,
Mhm.
but uh, because forces that were connected to Marcos all over the world were being connected to actions against former Filipino citizens in other parts of the world,
Right.
including Seattle, Washington. With the famous cases that were only recently resolved. I think they took more than 10 years in federal courts to prove those cases out. And I'm talking about the Domingo and Viernes murders
Right.
having to do with the ILW Local 37 up there in Seattle.
Right.
So
And this
there's a
has
lot
to
of
do.
that activity. And
Yeah.
so the Marcos Jr. was opening, he has opened Philippine military bases to the presence of American military forces.
Mhm.
And this is all a part of the U.S. plan to make China hesitate in terms of its expansion of military power, particularly naval and air power
Mhm.
in South China Sea.
Right, and already you're bringing up the basic conflict between Duterte and Marcos because as Marcos goes closer to the United States, Duterte during his reign was going away from the United States and closer to China and closer to Russia even.
Yes,
And,
absolutely. And
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 so yeah,
he also famously called the former President Obama a son of a bitch.
yeah, Duterte
Uh,
did.
yeah, he did,
Yeah,
and it was interesting to see how American media translated "putang ina,"
yeah. So
that
well,
doesn't
that
mean
could have
son
been
of a
your
bitch. It means that your mother's a whore, is what it means. So
yeah.
but I don't know who the hell is doing the translating for to American media,
No,
but
no, well, yeah.
Putangina is pretty pretty
All right.
easy to
So,
translate.
all right. So you got that conflict, and then basically Duterte thinks Marcos Jr. should be beholden to Duterte because if it wasn't for Duterte essentially pardoning Marcos Jr.'s father, the dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr., and burying him in the Heroes Cemetery in the Philippines, essentially, whitewashing martial law and the reign of Marcos's terror. I mean, I don't know if Marcos would have won again. As the next generation, the Marcoses would have been able to take power, but Duterte enabled all that.
Yeah, I think he was definitely a major influence. I don't know that I would credit him entirely with their success in winning the election.
Yeah, but
You
Dan,
know, the
but
Marcos just paid the price, right? Because
yeah, yeah,
they took Sarah Duterte in as VP.
yeah, but
So
Dan, if you allow Marcos, who was in cold storage up in Ilocos for years, if you allow him to be buried in the national cemetery, I think that happened like 2005. I forget the exact date, but that was a key moment that
yes,
that allowed people to say, "Oh, well, I guess martial law wasn't so bad." Because
I
remember,
don't. Nah,
you don't
I
think the
think it was the
burial?
beginning. Yeah, nah, I think it was the beginning of that.
Yeah.
I think it was the beginning of that. I think it was probably 50-50. There were a lot of people that protested against that, but it was the
Yes.
beginning of the reform, the reformation of the
Hmm.
Marcos legacy and martial law,
Hmm.
and what it did was permit people to at least discuss Marcos in a more neutral light, right?
Right. To
And they
allow
were
maybe
very.
forgive. Yeah, to allow forgiveness, which is essentially what happened.
There you
People said,
go.
"Oh,
That's a
Marcos
much
being that
better
bad,
approach.
we forgive him." But
I
but
think
it
that's a
also.
much better approach. And then once you forgive and you allow people to discuss it in more neutral terms, then you can
Mhm.
point out some of the Marcos successes, right?
No,
And a
there were
lot
a
of
few.
they had a lot of image successes. You
Yeah,
know, besides enriching themselves and their cadre, they had a lot of image successes,
yeah.
and the Filipinos saw themselves in a really positive light during especially the first. Let me see from 66 to no, I'd say even beyond 72, the Declaration of Martial Law, 66 to about 78, 79.
So what you're saying, Dan, is despite the fact that there were these culmination of freedoms, or certainly a curtailment of freedoms, that there were some things that looked good. That said, "Oh, a dictatorship could be okay." It's like
Oh,
it's almost like
they built a lot of edifices, right? You remember they
yeah,
built these huge freaking edifices, including the Philippine Cultural Center, right? And
yeah.
you
Well,
know
they built Makati, right? The whole financial
they
center.
built up
I
Makati,
mean,
and they helped a lot of people. With the boulevards that are named after big families, right?
right.
That run right down the middle of Makati.
The highway to Luwag.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, where Marcus is from. I mean, this is the thing about the Philippines that you know, in I think what what happened was when people power tossed out Marcos, the void was not filled immediately with someone strong who can come in and do any of those cosmetic things that the Marcoses were able to do. And that void was filled by a lot of corrupt politicians. And the only one to really bring it back to some kind of form was people like President Fidel Ramos. And
Yes.
you know, strong. They were not strong men in the dictatorial sense, but they were assertive, strong Filipinos, and
Well,
that's
Corazon Aquino was seen, as somebody who was kind of weak, and I think a lot of that was misogyny, right? I mean, because
yeah,
she's a woman,
yeah,
and also she wasn't known as an achiever of political accumulator of political power in her own right.
Yeah.
So she was a derivative, right, politician.
She was caretaker.
Ramos was not derivative at all. He had both a military, successful military career, and he was also a successful politician. So, um, and he was also Ilocano.
Yeah. Right. And
And
that
so,
matters. That matters to the
yeah,
people who are pro Marcos because they're real account. All right. So let's cut to the chase in
I
terms of.
happened to be at his inaugural. I remember that.
Yeah.
It's completely accidental, but
I have met Ramos. I have met
yeah,
Ramos, and he's a West Pointer. He
yeah,
has all the credentials of
that's right.
being the kind of Filipino who could lead a Filipino elitist in the eyes of America, who could be trusted. And while it was in Ramos's hands, there was stability in the
Yeah,
Philippines.
there was, and he did a decent job of keeping the gangsters in check.
Yeah. Well, the gangsters.
And much better job than Aquino, right?
Yeah, and
That-
this is the thing about the gangsters. You mentioned the gangsters. The gangsters seem to have, well, when Duterte got into power, it was almost like Duterte's war is a war on drugs and the gangsters, but it doesn't mean that the government has to act like the gangsters. That was the problem. And then people were being killed, and innocent people were being killed, and that's where the extrajudicial killings
yeah,
come in.
Duterte was trying to make the Trump list. He was trying to make the Trump list of most most admired
Strong man.
dictators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So now we've got Duterte, who is retired. He's in his 70s, and he's looking at Marcos Jr. Playing up to the Americans. And what is going on now? Duterte wants either some kind of constitutional change. Would that
Right.
enable him to regain power, or
Yeah.
is that the idea?
There
Or
is one. Yeah. There's each side has their own constitutional change plan. Okay, and they're in conflict with each other in that regard. So it's I I think it's going to get worse real fast. So I'm
are you
looking.
talking about civil war fast or what?
Nah, I don't think people are going to line up real quick for either side. I think they're going to wait to see what happens, and I think what's going to happen is just a continuing war of words, and maybe even the possibility that Sarah says this guy's got to go, and then they try to mount a campaign to have a junior ejected,
Bong bong.
an impeachment trial of some sort.
Wow.
But unless they catch him dirty, and the courts are complicit. If they have a situation, I haven't studied up on the current court, right, the Supreme Court in the Philippines, but it traditionally is very straight up and honest. Okay, but I haven't kept an eye on recent appointments, and
Yeah.
so I don't know how straight up they are.
Well,
Uh,
you're really painting a scary scenario I because we have Bong Bong, who's the president, Bong Bong Marcos. He is generally well supported, I think, but his vice president is Sarah Duterte, who is the daughter of Duterte, and so we have the two warring families right there, number one and number two. Sarah Duterte could do something to help her father regain power. That's not
right?
out. That's not out
Yes,
of the question.
yes, true.
And the likelihood of that is probably great. I would think.
Absolutely, I. That's absolutely true.
But so,
Yeah,
but now, who would be loyal to Bong Bong? I mean, the loyal, all
oh,
the people.
it would be it would be the family. I mean, not just the Marcos family, but everybody that's been in power before that. So each group, the Ramos presidency has its following, right?
Hmm,
And Philippine politics is very much familial politics, right?
yeah.
So it's families and family relations. And geez, I
And
lost my.
where is Aquino? Where are the Aquino folks? Where are the people who we met here in America
Oh,
who were anti?
they would be lining up. They're not going to be lining up behind Marcos, and they're not going to be lining up against behind Duterte either.
So they would
Okay,
be
so
the third group.
there could be a third group. I mean,
Oh,
I've
this
always,
would be
we've
this would
had
be
this conversation. We've been close to this kind of conversation before. And I have always said that despite how the Philippines looks, and despite how rancid, right, their elite power machinery looks,
Mm.
uh, how smelly some of the elitists look, and how terrible, really horrendous the Duterte administration was. Okay,
Mm.
the reality is there is an underlying element of people who really want the common good to be served in the Philippines. And they are among the Philippine elite. You know who they are. I know who they are. I don't want to get them injured
All
or
right,
killed.
but how about this? You've got the Romualdezes, right? That you have the Speaker of the Congress who is related to Imelda, right?
Yep, that's
And
her
so
maiden
that would
name.
be a Marcos. That would be a Marcos. So some people already, maybe the Aquinos have, and the Marcoses.
I don't know. Maybe not. It's possible. The Aquinos could line up with the Marcoses, but the Aquinos are a power on their own.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
uh,
who's the up and coming Aquino who might challenge and say,
I don't know.
"Hey,
I haven't been watching that carefully.
yeah, neither
You're,
I."
yeah.
But that's a possibility. Now, who would the Americans want? Because that's always a key.
It's going to be somebody. I think they would back up Marcos.
Well, right now, you've seen all the meetings between Blinken and Marcos within the last year or so.
Yep.
I mean, I think the U.S. has made a choice that they're with Marcos, but I'm just trying to think of any other Philippine politician who even comes close, and there isn't one. But it's going to mean a kind of a, not that Philippine Americans are going to be, aren't going to be paying attention to all this, but they're not going to be crazy about a Marcos.
No, not Filipino Americans. It's going to come down to who the elites are going to back, and the if we're going to talk about just the American political system,
Mm.
it's going to be Marcos that they support. They can't possibly support Duterte. He represents too much, of the immoral, amoral, unethical, illegal
Yeah.
kind of dictatorship that his
Well,
administration was. But
but
yeah,
look,
the corruption though, it's like Trump. I mean, the Republicans have been succeeding at getting conservative, so-called conservative and right-wing judges and justices appointed,
Mhm.
and because the Democrats were really weak on that, they weren't watching the pot, and
Yeah.
so the same thing has happened in the Philippines, and that's why as soon as we're done talking, I'm going to be looking up who's on the court
Yeah. Well,
because
well,
that's where it's
well,
going to go.
well, Dan, a name that a lot of Americans know, and it's because of sports, is Manny Pacquiao. But Manny Pacquiao, the senator now,
Yeah.
I think because of his homophobic views, has lost a lot of popularity.
Oh
He's
yeah.
no
Sure.
longer boxing, and
Sure.
he's seen as a bigot.
Yeah.
He kind of,
And the gay population in the Philippines is a large one,
yeah,
and the lesbian population is large too. And LGBTQ generally is big in the Philippines,
yeah.
and I don't know if non-Filipinos know that, but I was surprised when I was introduced to the size of that culture, and I observed way back in the '60s
Oh yeah,
a gay beauty contest, and it was unbelievable. I mean,
yeah.
some of the contestants looked like very beautiful and sexy women, and
Yeah,
it
I
was
mean, they
it
make
was unreal.
RuPaul. They make RuPaul look like a man.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how
yeah.
good they are. That's how good they.
There was a show on TV, a couple of years back, and I
Yeah.
remember that they did a news program. It might have been 60 Minutes or something like that, but
Hmm.
they did a news program on what it means to be gay and transsexual and all that stuff in Asia,
Yeah.
and they showed a beauty contest.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think a lot of people said, "Wow, that's unbelievable!"
Hey, look here in America, the Gay Asian Pacific American Group (GAPA). They have
yeah, they do.
these
Yeah, that's right,
beauty
Kappa.
pageants, and the Filipinos are always the most beautiful.
Yeah,
And I have to admit, in my family, when I went to the Philippines in the '80s, I met one of my cousins I hadn't met ever. I go back
right,
there,
right.
And so I met Gigi, and Gigi I thought was Gregory, but it was Gigi, and she was very well. It was officially a he, but dressed as a she, and very attractive cousin of mine. I don't know. I haven't. I've lost touch with Gigi, but I hope she's fine.
Yep,
But it's a thing. It's a cultural thing in
it's
the
a thing.
Philippines.
It
Yeah,
is a thing. I mean, they have large scale beauty contests.
yeah,
You know, I was wondering why the hell I was starting to question my closest cousin's sexuality. You know,
yeah.
because
And
I
then
said, why the hell is he bringing me here? You
yeah,
know.
yeah. You have to use the eggplant test. Oh, here's an eggplant. What do you think? What do you think? All right, so Dan, we'll watch what's happening in the Philippines, but is it's serious, right?
Oh, it's serious. I think it's going to go to the courts, and now I'm really curious about who's sitting on those courts. But it's really dangerous. I mean, there was a period during the Duterte administration where judges were being murdered in front of their house.
Yeah.
I
Oh
mean, you
yeah.
know,
Well, this is the thing. If Duterte gets back into power, the way he killed drug dealers, what do you think he's not going to use the same approach to everyone else who
yeah.
gets in his way?
Well, he didn't. You know, he didn't have to kill him because they had all of these willing people that wanted to get on the power side, the side of power. That's the same thing that happened during the Marcos regime. He
Yeah.
was not personally responsible. They were not personally responsible for all of the salvaging. Remember that term that
Yeah.
was going on at the time.
There's always
Salvaging, for those of you in the younger generation, was the term applied to people who disappeared,
yeah.
and usually they were politically connected in some way, and typically they were critical of the Marcos regime.
Yeah. Well, all
So,
right. So we'll keep an eye out on that.
mhm.
Let's switch gears, switch topics, and talk about some America stuff. Uh, Biden's strike is come up again. I mean, he's retaliated. There was a big thing in the news where Biden was at that very dignified presentation, right? Of the
Yeah, I think he used the sick F
yeah,
reference.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But the presentation of the bodies today in Dover, I mean, very touching.
Yes,
Um,
yes, and the
and
families did not want heavy press coverage. You know, one
right,
of the families anyway. Um, and he asked in advance if it was okay if he attended, and they of course said they would be honored.
yeah,
But he is, I think, they're being subtle enough. But he has again mentioned how the former president uh, described people who volunteered to serve in the military, and described also his comments made to his former chief of staff, General Kelly.
yeah,
And that's stuff that people need to hear. That I
yeah.
personally, I can tell you that when I was crewing,
Mm,
on my cousin's boat, when I was crewing, and he's a retired military.
mm,
When I was crewing on his boat, the most consistent crew were also veterans, U.S. veterans.
mm,
And they were not Asian, they were not Filipino. One was Latino, but very Americanized Latino,
mm.
and the other was an Anglo. Um, and they were very much anti-Hillary at the time. So this is when Trump announced that he was going to run,
Mhm,
and we would have discussions about those issues, and they were also extremely anti Nancy Pelosi.
mhm.
One was particularly critical, um, and a lot of their positions were based on disinformation. And
So,
I said, well, if you take a look I said, I'll be the first one to criticize Feinstein and Pelosi for some of the decisions they made about, for example, military bases in the Bay Area and in California, right?
mm,
And then with Feinstein, all over the country, I said I'll be the first one to criticize because they made a lot of what I consider errors. Uh, but you could see what they wanted to do was demilitarize as much as possible. Uh, and get us out of this mode of wanting to meet everything with military challenge, right? That could lead to further hostilities. So I understood what they were doing, but on a micro scale, their policies were really not helpful.
Okay, okay,
Uh,
but what do you are you saying though that Biden by striking the U.S. launched the airstrikes against Iranian forces and allied militias in Iraq and Syria today, and this is in retaliation for that drone attack that killed the 3 U.S. soldiers. Are you saying this is a political move by Biden to sort of bring those people into, behind him?
No, I don't think so. I think it's the correct military move.
Mm.
It's political in the sense that everybody's going to be watching how this works out, and of course, the Republicans and the whole right wing they're going to want this to fail miserably, so they can call him a coward and
Yeah, but they
a
want it
weak
to fail,
president.
but they would strike too. I mean,
Well, yes,
they would be
yes,
the
but they want and
hawkish.
but they want him to fail so that they can say he doesn't know how to strike.
Right.
that,
Okay.
that if you had a stronger president in there that was more willing to do something a little more harsh. I mean, you know what's his name? Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
He's talking about direct strikes into Iran.
Right. Right. Yeah. He
You
said
know,
that the
and
other day. But here's the other thing, and I wondered this: Did was there any consultation with Congress? Was there any authorization to move in this way, or is this just below the level so that it doesn't require a vote? Because I was surprised.
he's commander in chief. He is commander in
Yeah,
chief. I
I
mean, if you
know,
just
but
take a look at at Article 2, that's who
yes, but
he
don't
is.
you need an authorization
You
to
don't need
move?
an authorization. You could use an authorization if you're going to have an extended, okay, military presence. But what they're doing is these are, in my opinion, these are emergency executive strikes. You need a president that can do it right, and and that can do it as quickly as possible. Look at the bozos on the right were immediately saying, "You got to strike now. You got to strike now. Today
Right,
he's too slow. He's so weak."
right.
You got to be calculating about these things.
Well, this is what
Look at all of the places these people could strike from.
well, this is
They could
what
strike
Biden
from
said.
all over the place, and you know who is at greatest risk is Israel.
Yeah,
Okay, and Netanyahu and his stupidity and his fear about being exposed to finally being persecuted and prosecuted as a civilian, right?
yeah,
That's what's governing his behavior. So
yeah,
he is in a very Trump like situation, and the Israelis better get their act together and understand. Okay, you want to take this guy out now. They're saying we don't want to do it, while we got to wipe out Hamas and all that stuff. That is a right wing calculation, and they're
yeah.
still being stirred around by the people who are willing to displace Palestinians in the West Bank,
Yeah, well, I still would
with
like.
fake military. I mean, the settlers that dress up like they're military and
Right,
then use weaponry
right,
to drive people out of their own homes that they've lived in for generations. This is also going on in the West Bank. That's even outside of Gaza. So the whole Arab world is looking at this, right? The Iranians have influence in at least 5 different places where they've got a significant amount of military investment. We're talking about missiles, short range, long range, and they got everything except air power. These guys.
yeah. Well, look, I think Biden has to be strong. This is what he said. He said, "Our response began today. Will continue at times in places of our choosing. The United States does not seek conflict in the Middle East or
Yeah,
anywhere else in the world." I mean, I guess he has to say that because
yeah,
no one, I don't think anyone wants a broader conflict, but this is a statement that Biden put out. But let all those who might seek to do us harm know this: if you harm an American, we will respond. I'm happy that we had these 3 African American soldiers who were killed, and now we are avenging, their death because it's been a while. It's been a couple days, and finally here comes an action. And part of me is happy to see that. I would have liked to have had more discussion, maybe. The strikes began at midnight local time, hit more than 85 targets with long range bombers flown in from the U.S., the Pentagon said. And this is what they're attacking. They struck command and control operations, centers, intelligence centers, rockets, missiles, unmanned air vehicle storages, logistics, and munition supply chain facilities of militia groups and their IRGC sponsors who facilitated attacks against U.S. and coalition forces. So it it sounds like we're not going to get innocent people caught in the middle, but it's like we'll strike down your war forces, but I hope that it's not prolonged, and I
Well,
hope,
now we got to wait and see what the Iranians do. We got to wait and see what the Yemenis do. The
yeah.
Houthis.
Well, this is the thing about any kind of war, any kind of conflict like this. You don't want to get into this. Was there a diplomatic way to deal with this, or is that out of the question? As long
No,
when
I think
you
there
lose,
was. I think there has been a backdoor contact
yeah,
all along, and I think the Iranians know that. But the mullahs want a posture. They want
yeah,
a posture strength. They have to do this because they have to keep their thumb down on their general population.
yeah,
Underneath all of this stuff that this religious state
mhm,
control, right, has been as an imposition since 1979. You know, uh, in Iran is it's really a powder keg
yeah,
underneath there because I remember saying to my wife, if I were an Iranian woman right now, I'd be putting together a guerrilla a guerrilla unit
yeah,
or two. But that's what's going to happen. I mean, they can't. The mullahs are crazy.
yeah. Well,
They're
and
trying
they
to
don't,
take this society backwards, and they rely on their oil reserves to do it.
and,
So
and they don't care about casualties
no, they don't.
on either side, and that's the thing. And when you're basically a pacifist like I am, I mean, I understand that sometimes. Well, I don't know if there wasn't like I said, a peaceful way to get out of this, but now the strikes are on, and now it's a retaliatory thing, and now we just have to wait and see how the reaction. Although Biden has said that this is not going to be measured in hours but in days,
Sure.
so it could
And that
be a
that
long
I
time.
think that was exactly the right thing to say. I
Yeah,
think they got to know that this is just going to be a pattern. This sets a pattern, right?
yeah,
And this could be a continuous pattern for an unlimited period,
yeah.
right? He's not
Although,
making the mistakes. He's not making the mistakes that Bush, Obama, and Trump did all right in a row. Remember
right,
how again, so-called conservatives in the Republican Party were saying, "Why are you telegraphing dates of
right,
withdrawal and
right,
all that?" And those were mistakes. And
right.
I think that the way they withdrew from Afghanistan was a huge mistake.
Well, that verb telegraphing, I've seen in a number of reports today that Biden has telegraphed that he's going to do this, and
Yeah.
but I don't think, but more skillfully, I think, more
But
skillfully than
then,
the
but then they're also complaining that we want to be consulted in Congress.
yeah.
What
Well, in
for?
some ways
What
we
for?
do. In many
Yeah,
ways
but
we
see,
do.
yeah, but you consult with this Congress, you're putting the whole country at risk.
Yeah.
They
Well,
act they act entire they like showing off what they know.
yeah.
Okay?
Well, this is a show off Congress,
Yeah,
and
you got it.
if we shift to another topic that involves a show off Congress, it deals with the show off Congress in terms of the southern border, because they don't want immigration reform. They could spend time on immigration reform, but Donald Trump knows how much of a show off Congress this is, and he doesn't want them to solve the southern border because he wants to keep that as a winning argument for himself, Donald Trump, and the Republican Party, which I think is immoral. Number one, but because number two, he's already established how many people are killed because every day you don't solve the border problem. He talks about the drugs that come in. He talks about the undocumented come in, the terrorists who come in. I mean, it's almost like, well, we can deal with that for a
he
year, but all that happened
he
because
hasn't mentioned the attack on New York police officers yet.
oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
they're up to like 14 potential defendants. Four of them were not they were charged, but they were not imprisoned and held for trial. and
Yeah.
supposedly they were on a bus heading for our southern border, California's southern border, and ostensibly to get back into Mexico.
Yeah.
But it's really ridiculous. So the whole situation with, remember how 2 years ago the hot thing was uh, doing away with the police
Yeah. Yeah.
and doing away with bail,
Hmm.
and the way they wrote the laws was really loose,
Hmm.
very very broad, rather vague. Okay,
Hmm.
but one of the specific things that they did was take away discretion from the judges.
Oh,
So it was like, okay, we're going to do away with money based bail. You just got to swear that you'll show up, and we'll let you out. And so some idiot judge did that in the instances of the four attackers of the New York City police,
right.
and they're out. And so it supplies the right with a ready argument that the left is completely idiotic when it comes to
Yeah.
dealing with crime, and now
See,
we're permitting the attacks on the police. So we have the right that attacks the police, right?
yeah.
Okay, in the instance of not just January 6th, but when they bust somebody like the DOJ, they keep saying these are all unfounded attacks, right? These are witch hunts. Okay, so wait a minute. All of these juries and grand juries, right? Are engaged with the DOJ in a conspiracy to make stuff up, and then put people on trial in
Yeah.
front of judges who are also willing to be complicit in the conspiracy to make stuff up. I
Yeah.
mean,
See,
that's how extreme what you can call their logic is.
yeah,
Okay.
I know this politics. People hear it and they scratch their head and say, "This doesn't make sense. What's going on?" They lose faith in all of this, and that's why
Yeah, but who was the biggest purveyor of no faith in government? There was a famous quote. I'll give it to you right now. Government is the problem. Who said that?
I think Ronald Reagan said
You
that.
got it.
Yeah.
Right on the money.
Yeah, because it's always big government, right? And big government, and here's the thing: if they don't want government, they should get out of government and let the people who want to solve things with government go in and solve it. What happens is the American public, they want to live their lives. They believe in representative government. They elect representatives. They want them to go in and do the right thing. And when they don't, regular folks who are looking at all this representative government baloney, they lose faith.
Yes.
And this is, I think, a kind of irreparable harm that's going to, we talk about trying to save democracy, but when
Well,
people see that, democracy isn't working, they might say, well, let's get something that does work. I don't know
well,
what.
it started. It was a perfect storm that started during the Nixon administration,
Mm,
when he should have been impeached, right?
right.
And then when he rescued himself by resigning, he should have been prosecuted, but then
Yeah.
he was pardoned. Okay, so there was a large segment of American society that saw that whole process as being bunk, right?
Yeah.
Because his whole his whole West Wing went to jail. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the guy that did the least time was John Dean, right? He did a couple of years,
Yeah.
but the other guys did longer periods of time. Some of them resurrected themselves. They found Jesus, right, while they were in prison.
Yeah. G. Gordon Liddy. G. Gordon.
G. Gordon Liddy was the most famous one of those guys.
Yeah.
And John Dean, for a while, even in the early days of the Trump administration, was asked by some of the news networks, right, to come on and talk about it because of the comparison that was being made between Nixon, right, and
Mm,
and Trump, and all of the lies and stuff that were being told at the time.
yeah.
So, but they ignored the fact that some of the big lies were done in the Reagan administration as well. You
Yeah.
know, with Iran Gate, to open the doors, and then the Ollie North
Mm,
scheme with, and what did they do? They arrested freaking Noriega, right, from Panama, and put his ass in a lifetime mansion. He's got a really nice mansion, man.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Well, I just I want to know. Like a lot of people I talk to are not political, but they fear what's happening to our country, and they fear that the leaders are screwing up so badly that a lot of people are just turned off.
yeah,
They're,
that's right,
they're
and
turned
that's a
off.
danger. They're part of the danger mechanism. When they're turned off, they're kind of just saying "que sera sera," right?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, what happens is going to happen, and to be dismissive like that is to, when I say in my classes, just take a big yellow paintbrush and paint a V on your forehead, okay? Because all you're doing is making yourself a victim. If you are not active in the process, in the political process, then you're along for the ride.
yeah.
You're strictly a victim.
I know. You know, the thing is, you can't give up because as soon as you
That's
give
right.
up, then I mean, you can only do what you can do, and you can hope that when you do something, others will follow. But if you give up, it is almost it's the beginning of the end, and
Well,
it's
remember this: tune in, turn on, drop out.
oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
You were just a kid. You were a little kid, but I was in high school and college when that was happening.
60s,
And
60s.
and yeah, and people were joining communes and trying to live that kind of life
Yeah,
and turn away from the general society. And they really made an opening for the right wing. And that was
yeah.
the beginning of it. Was the Nixon administration and right wing. That's why Jimmy
Hey,
Carter was a one-term president.
hey, they're dropping out today too, right? They're
Yes,
saying,
they
"Hey,
are.
I'll take my Bitcoin, I'll take my stock options, I'll move them offshore. I won't pay attention." This is the Winklevoss twins, right? I
Yep,
will
yep.
denounce my American citizenship. I don't need democracy. I just need my life. It's a ultimate selfishness, and it's sad because it's this is what's happening to America. This is capitalism. This is global capitalism, right?
It's the worst effects of an out of control form of capitalism,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And being protected. I mean, we're really close to fascism right now, and people don't realize that. You got the unity of all of the powers that are necessary to establish an oligarchy in
Mhm.
in in American society, and the people just don't see it because they've not been educated to see it, to look
See,
for it.
and this is why it's important that we talked about Duterte and Marcos because Filipino Americans here, and there are some wealthy ones who are mostly Filipino. And they weren't born in America like we were. They were
They're
born in the
immigrants. Yeah,
Philippines and they're immigrants. They can appreciate democracy because they see it work here and they look at the Philippines and say, I don't want that. I don't want
yeah,
that.
but then when Trump rises,
Yeah,
and
where do they go? Where do they
some
go?
of them may have voted for Trump. What's the difference between Trump and
And Duterte.
yeah? Well, Duterte is an extreme case, but
Well,
because
Trump won't be that much less extreme if he gets in.
well,
Not
he
the
didn't.
second time
We can't.
around.
The only reason that a whole lot of people died under Trump is because of COVID.
Yeah,
Okay,
but just wait until he gets immunity. Because if he gets immunity and he can send SEAL Team 6 to go in and
but
kill whoever he wants,
yeah, we're probably on their list. So
yeah, I mean that is the thing. Anyway, but Trump is a strong man. Filipinos who have lived both in the Philippines and here know why we should fear strong men because they don't like him as strong as Duterte or Marcos, but they like him, you know, not meek, but they want a strong democratic leader, not like Trump.
yeah,
Uh,
well, and Marcos could be that guy. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not as much as I have this really heavy bias, right, against everything that the Marcos has stood for.
Uh-huh.
Ferdinand and Imelda,
Yeah.
and I look at the children, and I saw how they lived their earlier adult lives, and
Uh,
they were real rectums. The
yeah.
way
Yeah.
that really arrogant. Um, I can't even remember who our neighbor was here who had that. They had a house in Woodside,
Mhm.
and they all they had to do was travel down what's the main drag, starts with an R. Oh, Redwood Boulevard, and
Mhm.
they would just go all the way down there to San Mateo, and they had their own private freaking disco. Do you remember that place?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Bronco's,
yeah,
right at the foot of the San Mateo Bridge.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, they were living their life. I mean, I would drive past there and sit in the parking lot just to see who pulled up, right? And
yeah.
they'd be pulling up in Benzes and Ferraris and Porsches, and I, and it's like, okay, these are all people that swing with them, and you still see their names now. I mean, look at Sarah. Well, no, yeah,
Who?
Sarah Rodrigo. Yeah, no, I can't. I'm trying to remember one of the other family names is an Araneta.
Oh,
That-
the
I think that's
Araneta.
that's Bong's wife.
Yeah,
Bong's wife was an Araneta. That
Tommy Araneta.
Yeah, that's a freaking family name that goes back.
Yeah,
That's a Spanish colonial family name.
yeah. Well,
That
all right. So look, let's switch topics again to some of the things that were in the news today. More Asian American Christopher Wray went out there and said that China is the biggest threat to a generational threat to American life.
Yeah, but
Talked about,
China is striking back by saying, "Yeah, but we caught a couple of yours too."
yeah. Well, I mean, there's Chinese hackers. My point is, we are in this era now where every time Christopher A does this, it seems like he is like he's playing into this idea that there are people who are going to listen to this and play into the Chinese xenophobic stereotype. And the one thing that was different this time is that he had this disclaimer. He said, I don't mean the Chinese people. I don't mean Asian Americans of Chinese descent. I mean the Chinese government. Do you think it's going to make any difference? I wrote about this in my ALDEF column. I don't know if it's going to make a difference because people are going
Nah,
to hear.
nah, no, no. It wouldn't make any difference because we do not have a Muhammad Ali. If we had a Muhammad Ali, right, that could rescue us from centuries of of alienation as otherization, right? As
Mm,
we're the other, right? The classic others were, yeah, African descent, formerly enslaved people, and indigenous people. Okay, those are the others, right? And then we're the other. Okay, we're the
Asian
group.
Americans. Asian Americans are the
Yeah,
other.
Asian Americans, particularly Pacific Islanders too, to a certain extent, but they don't like being included with us, group wise. Okay, so I'm just going to say Asians, people
Yeah,
that range from Asia, right,
right.
all the way to Western Asia. Okay, which we called what, Asia Minor in the
Asian American.
past.
So you're including like the Uyghurs and you're
Sure,
including
everybody,
every.
everybody that's part, everybody that's got dark hair and tight eyes.
Yeah. So I mean, how about the Arabs? Arab Americans are they?
That's close enough. I get a lot of Arabs in my classes
They're
because
they're Asians,
you
and
know
they were in the news too because they're not budging for Biden. They want
yeah,
Biden to
yeah.
to fix his policies toward
Well, I
with
had a
Palestine and Gaza.
I had an interesting relationship with my Arab students because most of them were men,
Uh-huh.
and they had part interest in nightclubs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
remember
Well,
the '80s and '90s? The guys
yeah.
with
I
gold
do.
chains and
Yeah.
yeah, they
Well,
so
I
they're
look.
always inviting me downtown, but I said I have a wife and young sons,
Yeah.
so I can't be partying.
The Arabs they had the nightclubs and they also had the grocery stores for a while
Yes, they had the grocery store, and the
in San Francisco.
Palestinians had the liquor stores.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that uh, when I wrote about Christopher Wray and his dumping on, saying hey, the Chinese are the threat, but
It ain't gonna help.
I thought it was the same old
Yeah, it is.
until he had the disclaimer saying I don't mean the Chinese Americans, and it's almost like be kind, but you know what happened, when Biden took over, Biden had to say to the people, look, don't be vicious toward Asian Americans. They're Americans too. I mean, it's almost like people need reminders to not.
Well, yeah, because of the generations of otherization. I mean, see, the original one was we are so different and are we are so culturally, right, philosophically and aesthetically opposed in absolute
Mhm.
terms, 180 degrees, right? We got Eastern and Western, we got Occidental and Oriental. We're completely 180 degrees opposed. So much so that we can never be assimilated. We
Yeah,
are unassimilable aliens. That's the way, that's the language that was used in the courts. That was the language used in state legislatures and in Congress, right, to exclude Asians. Okay.
right.
And that lasted all the way up until after, well, during the Second World War, right, with Chinese and Filipinos
Yeah,
being allowed to enter the country. Filipinos had always been allowed, but they got cut off theoretically, right, in 1935,
right.
with
Tidings McDuffie Act.
yeah, and so it was a double ender, right? I mean, that gave Americans rights in the Philippines as though they were Philippine citizens, right? And then it excluded us down to a trickle,
Yeah,
and then it also provided that by the 10th year, which would have been without the war, right, 1945, we're completely independent, and they also started to reduce most favored nation status, so that they were starting to impose tariffs
mhm.
against goods coming into the United States. So the elites, and especially the post-Spanish colonial elites, the developing Filipino elite, right? We call them the Ilustrados, the Mestizo elites, right? They
Mhm.
had benefited from most favored nation status, and they were getting good money. They were getting good pay. My
Yeah,
first trip back to the Philippines, the exchange rate was 3.2 to 1 for so 3.2, yeah, pesos to $1.
that's
That's
it.
how big it. Yeah, I mean, it's like 20 times that now, you know?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, 50, 60 to
Yeah,
one.
yeah, it is. And
All
and
right.
sometimes it goes as low as 40, but usually it's in the high 40s and up into the 60s. So we have slowly lost more and more of that trade advantage, and that can be fixed. That can be fixed, but you have to have a strong policy come out of the freaking Congress, and it has to be signed off by the president of the Philippines. And so it's the same as we're doing here, and they have to do a good job of lobbying in D.C. And I don't know who's doing that. I don't know right now who the strongest ambassador is.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. So, yeah. All right. So let's switch from my column is on the ALDEF blog, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, where I talk about
Chris,
uh,
you had the Chris Ray thing, right?
Chris Ray. Yeah,
Yeah,
Chris
and the
Ray's
Chinese.
taken.
Well, there has been the most recent conviction. I think was 2 years back. I think it was in
No, there was a
22.
couple. There were a couple of cases with harassed academics. This guy Franklin Tao
Oh yeah,
was the
sure.
recent one, and then there was Sherry Chen, and I talk about Wen Ho Lee, who in 1999 went through
Yeah,
the.
that's a way back.
But the thing about Wen Ho Lee is that he should not be forgotten. You got to every time this comes up, you got to bring up Wen Ho Lee, because Wen Ho Lee, I mean, 9 months in solitary confinement. It was, for essentially making backup materials, so that so he wouldn't have to like bring stuff home. And I mean, it was a trumped up charge of espionage, and in the end, they the government was feeding the New York Times, and the New York Times was, you know, accepting hook, line, and sinker everything the government said, which was wrong. And later,
Yeah.
the New York Times had to apologize. The government had to apologize. They had a stereotype case against Wen Ho Lee. They made him pay, and then in the end, they gave him some damages. They gave him some recompense, but nothing that really fairly took care of him for what was taken away during the time he was under suspicion.
Well, and when they went after him, when the whole Western media, news media, was convicting him in the press, right?
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I got sarcastic once again, as I often do,
Ah.
and I said, okay, Okay, so are you going to go after the rest of the Chinese scientists working at the lab? Because I said I want to see him do it. I want to see him go after. Why don't you just check and see how many Chinese names you see on the list of researchers at Livermore, right? Just
Yeah.
just go down that list, and then what are they going to do? Now, the example that I pointed to was what happened to all of the Filipinos who were working for what would become the TSA
Mm,
at the airports, because we had Filipinos, right, who were the techs who were doing the initial checks of your baggages and all that stuff, and
mm,
there was a lot of Filipinos. And when we decided we were going to tighten up on that, they started looking at people who weren't citizens, right, as
mm.
though that made a big difference. And so it just the Filipinos, to a certain extent, I'm not going to say they deserved it, but they should have understood when we were warning them, but that maintaining your nationalistic position by saying I don't want to become an American citizen, because I want to retain my Filipino citizenship and all the rest of that stuff. And they go back and forth all the time, right?
Right, right.
So they still maintain a very strong Filipino nationalist sense of identity. Well, Feinstein fired them all,
Yeah. And
right? And she was a person who was really favored strongly in San Francisco as when she was mayor, right?
mm,
And then when she was on the board of supervisors, then to mayor, and then obviously to senator. And she maintained a strong relationship with individual Filipino leaders. Okay, and as a result, had a decent rep, right? Generally speaking, in the
yeah.
Filipino American community. But then that happened, and she burned all of the Filipino. And was there a major complaint over this? I saw more complaints about the Frasier show when they said, you could get a wife in the Philippines. The joke was Frasier's brother's wife, who you never see, right?
You got a mail order bride?
No, she spent something like $50,000 getting her face freshened.
Mm.
Get a little cosmetic surgery. I don't know if it was 50,000, but it was a lot of money. And Fraser's father, right, the curmudgeon, said, "I don't know what you doing spending all that kind of money. For $5,000 you get a whole new wife from the Philippines." Right, and Filipinos got really pissed off about that, and they went marching down to the consul general's office and criticized the Fraser show and American racism and everything else. But all of those people got burned out of their jobs at the airports, and I don't remember people. I mean, it was a complaint in our media, but I didn't see people marching down to the consulate.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, all these old things that you brought up. I forgot about that one. But,
Well, that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm
yeah,
here for. Every
actually,
Friday, if I can make it.
I actually have, there are things that I got mad at like years ago that I've come back and I'm not so mad about. Like, for example, do you remember when Steve Martin wrote that essay, The Wily, In Search of the Wily Filipino? Do you
No.
remember that? Oh, he wrote an essay for the New York Times. And it was about, or the New Yorker magazine, rather. And it was about this white guy searching for the wily Filipino. It was sarcastic, but I was still in my angry uh, Filipino American columnist mode. And I really chastised it. And I thought, well, this is not what you make fun of. This is not funny. That was, like I said, 2008, 2009, something like that. Now I read the column, I laugh at it. It's so funny, and my views have switched on what is worth protesting and what is not. What's happening to me, Dan? What's happening to me?
You're becoming a wizened. There's a difference between wizened and wizened.
Yeah,
And
I'm with.
you're becoming a wizened enter elder statesman is what you're becoming.
I don't know, but like I said, I remember my first reaction to it, and I was really surprised because I like Steve Martin. He's kind of a cultural comedic hero of mine, and I might have said some very bad things about him, punching down or something, because Filipinos weren't exactly um, seen as this paragon of Asian American strength and elitist. It just wasn't. Filipinos just weren't on anyone's radar, and I thought, God, I felt offended, and now. Many years later, I think, wow, what a genius piece of comic writing. It's so funny.
Yeah.
In search of the wily Filipino. It was a New Yorker piece he did. And all right, so one last thing before I let you go, and this was in today's New York Times. It's a headline. Utah gets initiatives to promote or guts initiatives. That's a big difference. Guts and gets. Utah guts initiatives to promote diversity. Bans at colleges and state offices. And I'll read the lead. Uh, Governor Spencer Cox of Utah signed a sweeping bill that pared back diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at the state's educational institutions and government offices, the latest state to take action amid the broader national backlash against such efforts. The law prohibits any program, office, or initiative that has diversity, equity, and inclusion in its name or asserts that meritocracy is inherently racist or sexist. It also requires student support services to be open to all students, outlawing efforts that focus on students of certain races or genders. So, this is a part of a massive effort across the United States. This is just the latest in Utah. You at San Francisco State back in the 60s were part of the strike that brought on College of Ethnic Studies, that brought on, you know, this this modern idea of diversity. It's evolved into this modern idea of diversity. What's your reaction to Utah? Because it's going to be state by state now. It looks like this is the latest, and
Well, we
it's
knew this was coming, right? I
yeah,
mean, the Harvard decision,
mhm,
even though it had to do with admissions policy,
yeah,
our previous discussions, we said the next move is employment, is the workplace.
yeah,
Okay, and then I talked about the 1990s uh, uh, pro- propositions, right? Specifically 209.
yeah.
So what was that? That was 19. It was the later 90s because it was 94.
No, it was like yeah, it was like yeah, it was in the 90s,
It
98,
was
99.
yeah, it was around 97, 98, something like that. But anyway, 209 comes out and it gets popularly passed,
Mhm,
but it fails because it was unconstitutional even under California state law, as well as unconstitutional because of its broad sweep and all that under federal law. So now we have a Supreme Court. That's the difference, right?
mhm,
That's the problem. Is we
mhm.
got a Supreme Court that made this Harvard decision, and so it's clear now that it's possible if somebody wants to challenge at the employment level,
Yeah.
you know, they could do so. And so it's the economic stuff that people dislike the most.
Well, but this isn't just. Well, this is both at the workplace, but also at schools, right?
It is primarily at schools and it's educational,
Right,
okay, but
right,
it also it threatens teachers, right?
right, right.
Because
Well,
it's a content based prohibition.
but
Um,
it's state offices, so that's the employment, and colleges. So state
yeah.
offices, if you're employed by the state, you're impacted, but it's not necessarily private business. It's not necessarily because they wouldn't have private business wouldn't have to follow diversity, equity, and inclusion policies necessarily.
Well, I got this quote from my source. It says that's the governor, right? Cox previously called requiring employees to sign statements in support of workplace and campus diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI,
Ah,
as quote awful, bordering on evil,
mm,
unquote. Okay, when you use the word evil, right, you're talking not about a legal uh, concept. You're talking about a moral concept, right? And so that's where they're going. They're gonna go against equity and inclusion because it's immoral, and then they're going to tie that immorality to the Constitution and a new interpretation of the meaning of equal protection. That's what they're going to have to do. because the arguments that are going to come out against these kinds of decisions are going to be an equal protection argument. That's how the Harvard case was decided. It was an equal protection argument.
Right. And so they're saying it's immoral to exclude.
There's yeah, but the reversal, we used immoral to exclude to develop DEI concepts and programs, right? They're using it's immoral to exclude by showing that this affects white people.
That's
Okay,
what they're saying.
it in essence is a
It's a
revival with a stronger context, in their favor. It's a revival of the old reverse discrimination, right? The
right.
reverse racism concept that was played out in the Baki case, both
Right.
both at the state level and the federal level, way
But
back in the 70s.
it is a
Yes, it is. It
white
is,
protection law.
and it's a white protection law that's based on very little evidence that they're being injured as a group, because the
Right.
assumption is when you let these people in through DEI programs, you're displacing white people. You're displacing qualified white people. That was
Mhm.
the original argument in the Baki case. Okay. But the counter argument was, okay, so we shouldn't, under the Equal Protection Clause, have programs and projects that try to remedy the harm that's been caused by hundreds of years of exclusion of people. And so, as long as you could prove that, in point of fact, racism and prejudice that clearly, right, disadvantaged certain people, okay,
Mhm.
that sexism that clearly disadvantaged women, right, and then later on sexuality, sexual difference that clearly disadvantaged people, where it was pronounced and evident, right, clear on
Mhm.
its face, those kinds of things would survive. They survived Baki, but then they started being challenged by legislation in the 90s, and they won because of the popular vote, right? I mean,
Mhm.
these were majority vote issues, and so when my students asked, "Why would you do that? Why would you put a proposition like that up if you know that even if it gets a popular support and a majority of voters vote for its passage, why would you do that if it's going to get struck down and you believe that it's probable that it's going to get struck down by the courts if people challenge it?" And I said, because you get a clear reading of what popular opinion is on that stance, and they will move forward from there. They will develop a different proposition, and the next time that proposition will be informed to the benefit of the people who propose it, right?
Mhm.
By their past experience. And so they said, so they're doing this just to get people, to take positions on the issues. And yeah, it's a essentially it's a government sponsored. In fact, it's a government sponsored.
Political ploy.
Well, it's a government sponsored. What do we call those things when people do test uh, test panels for new products?
Oh, like a RMD or
Yeah,
RD
yeah, and
research
so yeah,
R&D.
they'll have yeah. I used to get called for those.
Oh, yeah, it's a oh
Yeah,
yeah,
they pay us $50, $100, $200.
yeah.
They look for a certain uh, a certain pattern. Of,
Focus group.
yeah, that's right, exactly.
This is they're doing this is a political focus group,
And that's
and
what they do. Essentially they got that same device is being used at a governmental level to find it. So even if the damn thing fails or it's struck down by the courts, it informs them on how to deal with it if they want to take it to court the next time. And that's
yeah,
exactly what they've done.
but it's like it's almost like piling on. Do they have to do it? I mean, it's like
Yeah.
they
This is
already have
this is
affirmative action in
this
the
is an
bag.
absolute defense against the invasion of people of color where we're not supposed to be. See, the thing that I talked about in my classes was more and more of us, because of our level of education and our ability to adjust to changing patterns in American society, right, is that we can now, in most instances, go toe to toe with white folks for the same jobs. The only place where we're underrepresented is at the top slots, right? At the CEO slots. The same way that women of every race and ethnicity are also underrepresented, but they're coming on strong and starting to take on more CEO positions. They're running for political office and winning, right?
Mm,
Mostly as Democrats and or independents, and those things pose a clear threat to the old misogynistic white male upper class. And so there clearly the competition is at hand, and
right.
that is the greatest threat, okay, that faces white American society as a group. This is, they're looking at that and saying, wait a minute. I mean, look, I always make jokes when somebody comes up on TV or on the radio. We're on NPR, and then there's a new development, and it's a South Asian, right? Uh, MD or a PhD. Uh, it's a it's a Chinese immigrant, especially they have a slight accent, right? They're gonna get, and I go, don't they have any white experts in this in this field? Why do we keep saying all these people, man, with foreign accents and they're Chinese or whatever the hell? We can't even pronounce their names. They got like 52 syllables in their freaking name. Yeah, that
Right.
kind of thing,
And
right?
they're anti DEI.
Yeah, Ramaswamy. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a number. New York Times wrote about a black guy from Colombia who's anti DEI. How can you be a person of color and anti DEI?
it's really easy. You can say, "Look, I got mine through my own blood, sweat, and tears." That's
Yeah.
a Ward Connerly.
Yeah.
He
Every
admit, he when he was pushed, he had to admit that he was a beneficiary of an affirmative, at least initially, of an
Sure.
affirmative
I
action
mean, we
program.
all were. We all were to a
To a
degree, but
certain degree, yeah,
yeah.
to a certain extent, that's true.
But what they're saying is, it's not fair. We should just have it meritocracy. I mean, because they want to go to meritocracy. The thing is, if you redefine it, meritocracy is what is meritocracy? Does that mean grades? Everyone has good grades, or
That's
I
what
mean,
they say supposed to mean by
yeah.
fair and open criteria that has nothing to do with race or gender or anything. It's just objective criteria, right?
Well, I mean, unless I mean, there's a move away from tests and
Well, that's what
testing.
the Chinese. That's what the whole Chinese movement in Harvard was,
Yeah,
right? Is
yeah,
that they want? That's what they did at Lowell. That was
yeah,
the argument at Lowell. We
yeah,
want it to be merit based, merit only,
yeah.
but then the mistake that they made was accepting the ruling by the court, where Harvard doesn't have to disclose who their admittees were. They don't have to go. That was one of the things that Prop 209 tried to do in California, was make it completely illegal to even count how many people based on race. No identification for any reason on race, ethnicity,
Oh, that
immigration.
way we don't know how racist we are.
Yeah,
That's the great thing. We don't know. Colorblind means
we
we
don't want to
don't
know.
we don't have to be we don't have to acknowledge our racism anymore.
Yeah, and if by some circumstance people are able to prove we are in fact discriminatory, we don't want any remedies for that.
We
Okay.
don't need them. We don't need them. That's immoral. It's
Yeah,
immoral to
yeah,
have
yeah.
because we're
Well,
colorblind. We
when the
like
when the
blindness.
when the Supreme Court gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act,
Mm.
and then suddenly all of the states came up with new voting requirements. Remember that, voting
Oh
ID
yeah, yeah,
laws and everything else.
yeah,
That was pretty clear proof, right?
yeah,
That the Voting Rights Act was working, right? That it was working in favor of having more people engaged in the political process. Okay. Soon
yeah.
as the Supreme Court came down with that decision, wham, what, 17 states instantly came up with new. And so they were just waiting for the decision.
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing with the Harvard case now. They already have a plan. And so all of you people that voted for these people, hey, good luck, right? I'm
Yeah.
retired. I got my nice benefit package, and I'm gonna watch you guys suffer through all of this stuff
Well,
because
it's
you need to
this
pay
is
the price. You
this is the
vote for
hard
these
thing
clowns.
because you go back to the civil rights movement 64, 65. You see where we are now and you start seeing the pendulum swing the
Oh
other
yeah.
way and
Oh yeah.
it's like, oh my god.
Yep.
um everyone took progress for granted, and that was a sure sign that.
Especially people who made it into the middle class and the upper middle class.
Oh
And
yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
who you're going to see come forward and say, "I'm against DEI." I mean, what is Vivek? Ramaswamy. I mean, he's supposedly a billionaire, I guess.
He's got his
And
money.
I want to know how he made his money.
A biotech or whatever. I think.
Sure.
Yeah, that's how he made his money. But it's blind. I mean, he thinks he did it by himself, but he didn't do it by
Well, yeah,
himself.
but remember how Obama said you didn't do this. You didn't do this on your own. You didn't.
I know. Well, and
And
even if
people
you
got really
did,
upset.
even if you did, you take the elevator up, you gotta send it back down.
Yeah.
That's an old, I think,
Yeah, but
Ramsey.
I don't want, I don't want other people on my floor, man. I like my
Oh yeah,
own,
yeah,
I
get off
like
my
my
phone.
space with a view. I got I
Selfishness.
like the exclusivity of my condition, folks. Yeah,
Um,
I'm happy up here.
that's what it is. American selfishness. That's what.
Oh, that's what we got. And
Yeah,
and we have all these little wars going on. People are worried about, and the most attentive people are worried about what the hell is going on globally.
yeah,
But we can't do much about that, right? I mean,
yeah,
that stuff moves. I mean, that's one place where obviously DC really makes a difference. Washington DC really makes a difference.
yeah.
But when it comes down to the ground and people are just looking at their own condition right here at home,
Mhm.
they have a tendency to blame DC. But the reality is the domestic close politics at the city, county, and the state level is really a more direct impact, right, on their quality of life,
Mhm.
and that's what we have to pay attention to. That's
Yeah,
what we're not paying attention to. I want to make sure that the people who are in the very red areas, the red jurisdictions of California, it's not hard to reach those people and to bring them closer to the center in terms of participating as conservatives, but participating as intelligent and correctly and accurately informed conservatives.
yeah.
That's all I think we want.
We need to
We
talk to
need
each
that. That's
other.
exactly my position.
We need to
We
talk
need
to each
that.
other. Yeah, we need to talk to each other. We need to understand that being polarized means okay, you have one side, here's another side, but it doesn't mean that that's where you stay. You got to move together toward a center. I don't know.
And
Have you
right,
been?
it's the liberal responsibility right now in California. It's the liberal responsibility to be able to reach out to those people,
Yeah,
and if you have to, you bypass their local representation and you just talk directly to the people. That also is like the governor.
yeah.
He could play a major role in that by reaching out to those districts
Well,
and and
have you
simply
been
listening to what their needs are.
have you been following the California Senate race? It looks like it's all money, right? I mean,
You
it's
mean
got
Schiff versus Porter versus Lee?
it's Schiff, Porter, Lee, and then there's Garvey. The LA
Oh yeah,
Times
yeah.
LA Times came out with a real devastating uh, article that exposed Steve Garvey's private life as a man who, birthed all these kids. He's disowned his firstborn. He is a terrible father. He is not, he's got this image, this squeaky clean image, and he's anything but. And he's like an empty, he's worse than an empty suit. He's an empty baseball uniform. And that's the only reason why people might like Steve Garvey. But he was on that debate on Channel 11 in LA, and it was broadcast here in the Bay Area. And he is just not a very good politician. He just thinks, "Hey, I'm Steve Garvey, vote for me."
Yeah,
But
that's
so
basically it.
his main thing is, "I'm not a professional politician."
That's right.
Yeah, great. Well, he should be doing something other than politics because he's not good enough to be in politics. All right, so now
Well,
that leaves
I'm
the
very
three.
thankful. I'm very thankful for all of those people on the right who say, I'm an outsider.
Yeah,
I'm not a professional politician. I'm an
yeah,
anti-politician
yeah,
and all that kind of stuff. Because what they have proven is man, you guys don't know how to govern.
They don't know how to
You
govern.
got
They
to go
don't know how to.
back and get at least a couple of units more in a political science class, man,
Yeah.
because
Well,
we
get
don't have it.
this. Well, what we have in California instead now is we have Schiff and Porter and Barbara Lee. We have
Yeah.
three Democrats, and we have the diversity of democracy
Yes,
in
we do.
play, which is, or the diversity of the Democrats, because
Yep.
we see that it's not seen one Democrat, seen them all.
Shift,
Three
shift,
different
shift, shift is closer to the middle.
Schiff is
Porter is a little more progressive, and Barbara Lee is really the progressive star. And
well,
she,
she's a progressive star, but also you're dealing with two whites and a person of color,
okay,
and that says a lot.
yeah,
That says a lot about their constituency and how they view politics and how they view the problems. And you look at how Schiff, what he says is
do
his
we
main
consider
thing.
him white because he's Jewish, right?
Well, but look at his accomplishments. Schiff can say, I led the prosecution against Trump. We impeached him. We didn't convict him. All right. Well, okay. Thanks, Adam. You got a lot of play. Yeah, we impeached the guy, but we didn't convict him. That's the Senate. That's the Senate's fault. But in terms of real accomplishments, he's good. He's a smart guy, but as far as other things that he's done for people, I don't know. For the communities,
Yeah,
you know, maybe he's a Democrat, but all right. Then you look at Porter, consumer advocate. She's not for earmarks. That's her big thing. But as Schiff and Lee say, hey, this is the language of government. And if it weren't for earmarks, we're not going to get anything for our communities. So, this is how we govern, and you can criticize it, but this is how we get money for our communities through
yeah,
earmarks.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I don't. I If I were running her campaign, I would have made more. I don't know why she's doing the earmark thing because earmarks are a necessary element. It's you know, remember the old back scratching and log
Yeah.
rolling and all of those terms
Yeah.
that we
I mean,
learned when we were
it,
kids.
it's
This is part of the
politics.
political process. It's part of building compromise and all that. But
Yeah.
so that's important. But they should have just made the issue of congressional stock buying, right?
Start playing. Yeah.
Yeah, that they
Now
get to play.
that's important, because more people.
Extremely important.
Yeah, more people are in the market now, but here's the thing: more rich people are benefiting,
That's right.
and if you're an insider, like some people who might get information coming their way.
You hear it first. They
Yeah,
hear it first.
yeah,
I mean, when I was in law school, I raised that as an issue. They said when we were talking about insider trading,
yeah,
and I asked the professor, how many agents? I said we're entering the computer age, right? I was in law school between 74 and 77.
yeah,
So computers were now miniaturizing, and they were, Apple was getting ready to pop their first Macintosh, and so with IBM a couple of years behind, right? IBM Big Blue didn't hit the fan until what 80, 81, I think, but
yeah.
we could see it coming. And I remember the guy that established uh, Sharper Image.
Oh yeah, yeah. That guy.
Yeah, Rick.
I
Yeah,
know.
he was a schoolmate. He was actually, I think, a year ahead of me at the law school, and he would always have these great ideas about using computerization, digitization, and all that stuff. He was way ahead. I mean, he
Yeah.
would be sitting in the cafeteria
Well,
alone.
well, well, look at this. Look at what's happening now. In the front page of the Wall Street Journal today, they make a big deal about uh, how Meta,
Yeah,
right? Meta sets first ever dividend as growth takes off. It's in like the prime position in a newspaper. And how many times within the last, say, in 20 years ago, when Meta was Facebook and people were saying, oh, this is great, Facebook, but how are they going to make money? There were doubts.
right. That's right. How are you going to monetize it?
Yeah. People think, oh, this is cool, but how are they going to? 20 years later, first time ever dividend, they're like,
10
king of
years
the hill.
later, 10 years later, it says Zuckerberg on the
Yeah.
biggest part of the General Hospital in San Francisco, right?
Yeah. So I'm just saying that it's funny how but you would first hear about these things at the congressional level, and especially now with AI, right? You
Yeah.
hear
Oh
about
man.
what Musk's doing, what Nvidia, the chip that makes AI work, how they've exploded. And all right, so I agree that Katie Porter should have maybe focused on that rather than the earmarks. But other than that, Katie Porter is a consumer advocate,
She is
a nice,
consumer advocate.
pleasant. I say this with all due respect, a nice, pleasant white lady who is a consumer advocate, a progressive, and
Well,
it's not
she's an
helping.
attorney and a professor, so
Right, and she has this whiteboard. It says Katie Porter's whiteboard.
she's
No,
got a,
it's Katie Porter's white vision, and this is the problem. That's what's distinguishing Schiff and Porter from Lee. They're white. Lee is not, and Lee does not have the money to make her
that's right.
case. And so, why is it I'm in LA and I see all the ads? I'm in San Francisco, I see all the ads for Schiff and Porter. I'm I'm here in Northern California where this is Lee country, should be Lee country. I see nothing about Barbara Lee, nothing, and I'm sad because
I have donated money, but it's not big chips. I'm kind of
yeah,
spreading it around. But
yeah,
yeah,
I think
I really feel badly about it.
and
Yeah,
she cannot move up in the polls right now. The polls are Schiff, Porter, and Garvey duking it out, and then Lee far behind
yeah.
in single digits. It's sad because of all the politicians running. I think she is the most meritorious.
I agree with you.
She's
She
the
has
one
taken
that
the strongest stances, sometimes solo, and they were accurate. Her the facts on which she was basing her position, the political outcomes that she was anticipating, were
yeah
all accurate. She was right on the money,
she
and
she's yeah she
and
stood up to all that.
she's carrying the experience of people of color.
Yeah,
She's not, she pays attention to all of us. She pays attention to everybody.
but what buoys her up is the fact that she represents Alameda County, including Berkeley. That's what saves her from. That's what allows her to take such progressive outsider
That's
stands.
true.
But she's rewarded in her district. That's
Right.
not enough. She could do more for California. She's made that point. I mean, in one debate, Steve Garvey says, "Well, I went to the homeless and I talked to some homeless people and he tried he tried that kind of thing and everyone on the three Democrats really went after Garvey for that
Yeah.
kind of I walked among the homeless, so I know how bad they but only Barbara Lee had the reality or she had power in what she was saying because she was unhoused at one time in her life. You know, not true with Porter, not true with Schiff.
Yeah.
I hope things turn around for Barbara Lee because she has until what March, right? Super Tuesday. That's when they elect the top two run off.
Yeah, it's a runoff.
Yeah, the top two, and it looks like if things go the way they are, Schiff and Porter, when it should be Schiff and Lee. I hope that happens, and I hope
Yeah.
that Barbara Lee gets an infusion. Anyway, hey,
Oh, we should
Dan,
mention one other thing.
yeah,
The former Republican House Leader McCarthy, former Speaker of the House,
what's happening with him?
he's got a revenge campaign on, and he's going after the 7 or 8 uh, clowns that got him pushed out,
Oh, really? That's good.
including the current Speaker of the House, Mr. Johnson.
Well,
So
he's out, right?
Bobert is high on his list. Gates
Mhm.
and Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? And
So Kevin McCarthy wants to be a conservative Democrat.
I don't know
I mean, but his replacement's probably going to be an Asian American guy from Bakersfield,
what's his party affiliation.
Republican.
That's what I thought.
I mean, Kevin McCarthy is left, right? Is he, I mean, he's not in Congress anymore, right?
No, he resigned. Yeah,
He officially resigned. Yeah. So there's going to be an election, and the guy
yeah,
who's
March in March.
yeah, the guy who is ahead is an Asian American in Bakersfield. Maybe he has a shot.
He had
Probably.
a South Asian name, I think.
Yeah, I think Fung. I think anyway, he's an assemblyman, and he he was going to run for re-election in the assembly, I think, and then and then McCarthy left, and he said, "I want to run for McCarthy's seat," and then what happened? So they had to make a special ruling to allow him to pull out of the other race so that he can run for. Oh, it's Vince Fong. Vince Fong.
Oh, okay.
And there's a lot of Democrats. It would make it a lot easier if other Democrats, Harmesh Kumar, Marissa
Yeah, that's the
Wood,
guy I was thinking of. There were a whole bunch of people, and Kumar, yeah, was a Democrat.
Kumar's Democrat,
You got
Vince Fong.
four Republicans and three no party.
Yeah. So look, I drive through Bakersfield. It's kind of a weird place. Bad air. Kern County has bad air.
I hate to break this to you, man, but
Yeah.
everything in the Central Valley looks the same to me. You know.
Oh, okay, come on. Bakersfield doesn't hold a candle to Fresno. I mean that.
Yeah.
Fresno
Well,
is
it's okay. Okay, that's true. You know,
yeah,
Bakersfield's greatest claim to fame, besides being agricultural, is that you can see uh, where you're going over the coastal mountain range,
oh
man.
yeah,
It's a little
the air.
different.
No, the air is not the greatest thing. The greatest thing is the Buck Owens Museum.
Oh, wow!
Buck Owens is
I'm gonna
from
have to check that out.
Bakersfield.
That's great. That'd
Yeah,
give me a good reason besides getting gas, right?
yeah. Oh, you don't just get gas in Bakersfield. You got to stop at the Buck Owens Museum. Every
Okay.
time I've driven through there and wanted to stop by, it's been closed. But that's all
Yeah.
right.
If you could get cheap gas and go see Buck Owens and maybe
Yeah.
get a good burger, we're
Burger.
yeah.
Actually, that's one of the things. They don't have good vegetarian food in
Oh,
that part of the Central
oh, what
Valley.
a bummer.
Yeah. Well, although you can get rice and beans, just don't put lard in the beans. Don't put lard in the beans. Don't butter
Right,
the
right.
rice. Rice and
Yeah.
beans. That's good. That's good. That's good.
Just yeah, yeah, that was the other disappointing thing. We got to talk about that sometime. The disappointment is all of the plant based meats
Yeah.
have next to no nutritional value.
That is not true. There is
It's
some
like
nutritional value.
eating
That
air.
the problem with the plant-based meats, the fake meats, you'll get fake diabetes. That's the problem.
That's terrible, man.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Well,
I
then
eat all
I'll have
this
to
fake.
pay for fake insulin.
Yeah, I got all this fake meat. I got fake diabetes. So I went to my fake doctor, and he said, don't worry about it. Eat rice and beans. So
That's terrible.
yeah, but no, but it's true. You know, I will say this. I have cut back on fake meat so much that I've just gone to. There's nothing wrong with eating plants.
Yeah, that's right.
Nothing
We
wrong with
just go
eating.
heavy on veggie. Yeah,
Nothing wrong with eating tofu.
I
I'm
like tofu.
tofu.
Well,
Tofu.
see the
Tofu.
Asian fake meat, and especially their fake seafood.
Ah, soy.
It's incredible. It is incredible.
Yeah,
Some
if
of the
you
stuff is so good
yeah,
that you do not miss meat. I'm
if
not kidding. There's
if you
this
go
great
to
place right
yeah,
on Kearney. Oh, remember the last time we ate down there?
yeah.
And
Well,
that was
Ranch
really good.
99.
Huh?
Ranch 99 will sell you the bean curd,
Right,
the skinny bean curd threads,
right.
and then you can crisp it up and make it seem like duck skin or something.
Yeah,
I mean, there are all sorts of ways.
or shredded
And
shredded pork.
yeah,
Right, pulled pork.
soy is.
You ever
Oh, all right.
have you ever had your pork pulled?
Well, yeah. Well, here's my tip for you. Here's my
It
tip.
actually it felt rather good.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah. Here's my tip for all you would-be vegans. These guys, I don't have a financial stake, but there's a company called Butler's Soy Curls. The
Whoa.
best fake meat, Butler's Soy. You can go to their website, order, tell them Emil sent you, and they'll say, "Who's Emil?" And but
Where does it come from? Where does it come from?
it's
First of all.
Oregon.
Oh, no
They,
kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, they're
So
big into, yeah, they're big vegan up there.
yeah. So Butler's soy curls. I'm telling you that has saved us. We barely Impossible Burgers, Beyond Burgers, rarely. When we just don't eat them
Well, it's really
because
expensive, and it's not that great. So,
loaded with fat. Well, look, you're going to get protein, but you're going to get a lot of fat too. When they're talking about nutritional,
well,
negatives
but
or fake.
that's they put that there for the flavor.
Oh, the
They need
flavor,
that
but
for the
yeah,
flavor.
but then you get the fake meat, you get the fake diabetes. It's not
No,
good.
no, you get real fat. Is what you get. It's fake. No, it's a fat.
Fake.
You've got to hit the treadmill. You have to run around outside. Maybe, yeah,
Oh yeah,
you
good
you
meal.
know.
All right, so Dan, look, we talked 2 hours for this show, Dan.
Oh my God! You
Oh
said you
my God.
wanted to do it in an hour, man. What happened?
Well, we just got to. We haven't even talked about the 49ers, but they play next week. They play
Yeah, it's
next.
another week away, so
So
we'll get ready. We'll get ready
yeah.
for that
Well,
conversation.
I'm excited. They hadn't been in the Super Bowl in a long time. Well, no, they
4
hadn't
years.
won a Super Bowl, but they were
Yeah,
in the Jimmy
they've been there a
Garoppolo's.
couple of times, but they lost both times. The last two times they were there,
They should have won the Jimmy Garoppolo Super Bowl. They were
they should
ahead.
have. That was a
They were
screw up.
ahead.
That was really a screw up. They
That
gave
was
that
a
one
screw.
away.
Yeah, and I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win.
Yeah, I've heard
It's going
some
to be
ridiculous
close.
scores. I've heard some ridiculous predictions. I think it's going to be tight. It's all going to come down to our defense and
Yeah.
how if they can stop the famous Mahomes.
All right. So I have Seaweed the Otter here.
All right,
He's
cool.
gonna he's gonna
The
make a
Otters are
prediction.
making a comeback, man. They're setting them up all over the place, up and down the coast.
Oh, really? Yeah. I
Yeah,
like
yeah. They there's a reclamation project
for otters.
up. Yeah, come no for there's an erosion issue on some beaches
Mm.
along the Northern California coast, and the erosion was being caused by an invasion of crabs.
Oh, so the otters eat the crabs.
Exactly.
Ah, good.
So they're relocating otters in a certain. Now I like
Otter
that.
relocation, Dan.
Yes,
Otter
otter
relocation.
relocation. It sounds inhumane, but evidently the otters love it because they got all of the crabs they want,
Yeah.
and it's helping to prevent the erosion.
Have you do you see? Have you seen an otter eat?
Oh yeah, all the time.
I mean, they
I,
they
I love watching them.
they
Whenever
bang on
we
their
go, yeah,
chest.
that's right. They get a rock,
Yeah.
they pound the clams. They like the clams and the barnacles
Yeah.
all around Monterey Bay. So
Yeah.
it's really fun to watch them.
See, this is the thing. This
Watch
is
them eat.
this seaweed
He's
has a
cute. That's
seaweed.
cute. That's
And
unbelievably cute.
and is this a male or female?
Well, I can't tell.
How
No,
about now?
oh, okay, I can't tell. If it's like that, and that's supposed to be a gender specific representation, I guess it's a female.
Not well. It's inadvertently anatomically correct. I found out that doing my Beanie Baby research, seaweed the otter is a her. So don't misgender seaweed.
Right on,
Seaweed's
right
a
on,
her. It's a her.
right on.
So and then
One of my favorite animals.
yeah,
They are like raccoons though. They can get into everything. So
yeah. I like
you know,
otters.
I
Okay.
mean, cuter than hell and really smart. They
Seaweed.
remember the aggressive large otters, Monterey Bay. They climb onto people's boards.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then I just like to look at them. Bang on their chest.
Yeah,
Bang the clams.
yeah, and they look you straight in the face while they're doing it.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
look you straight and say, "Can you do this? Can
yeah.
you do? You can't do this."
I like the
They show
otters.
off.
The otters. Okay. All right.
All right,
So
I'll see you
Dan,
later.
listen. Look. Thanks for talking about all
That
these
was fun.
topics.
It was
And
once again fun.
yeah,
We got to watch what's happening with the Supreme Court of the Philippines.
yeah, yeah. If you've missed any or all of our discussion about Rodrigo Duterte and Ferdinand Marcos Jr., you just manipulate the tape, go back to the beginning. But once again, good insight from the professor. I look forward to more talk next week when we talk about you do your Supreme Court research. I don't. There's still a lot of bad stuff in the Philippines. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know. I don't know if I'd go back right now. I don't know if I'd want to go back right now. I
Well,
haven't been back there since the '80s, so why would I go now? So
yeah, we haven't been back for 20 years,
yeah,
24 years now.
I mean, after a
Last time
while,
we
it's
were
like
there was 2000.
it's all new. I really love seeing other parts of Asia. Actually,
That's
you
what
know,
I'm. That's what we're planning.
Vietnam,
That's what we're planning.
interesting. Cambodia.
I got connections. I got connections in Vietnam and Singapore.
I've been to Malaysia. Malaysia, fascinating because it's not just I mean, it's Asia, but it's like you're in a Muslim country.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
very very mixed kind of thing, and then you got the big capitalist buildings, the glass buildings. Um, no, fascinating place, Malaysia. I didn't make it to Singapore, but Singapore would be interesting. Hey, did you see the TikTok guy? Uh,
yeah, yeah,
he,
yeah.
he got
That
grilled.
was- what idiots, man! The Republicans kept. Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
But
I read,
that's going to be a thing. That's going to be a thing where
oh yeah,
they're
oh
going to
yeah,
they're going to haul in
yeah.
Asians, and you
It,
better.
it, it worked. It worked 70 years ago, so why wouldn't it work now? You know,
I mean, if you're Asian American, you better be ready for the. Are
you
you?
better
Are
be
you? Have you
ready.
ever been a member of the
You
Communist
better,
Party?
you better be ready.
Man, I mean, I saw that and I said, "Wow, this is the
I have your
McCarthyism."
information that you were a radical and that you were once a member of the Third World Liberation Front, San Francisco State. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Wow, the
Yeah.
Asian American McCarthyism
Yep.
coming, coming,
Here we
coming.
go. They coming for us now, man. They coming for us, brother.
If Cotton, the Senator Cotton,
Oh
if
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah. Have you
boy.
ever been? Have you now, or have you ever been? I mean, that's exactly the same language they used that HUAC used, right, when they were running
Yeah,
after people here.
I know it was. All right,
1960, man. What
how
was
do we
their last stop on their anti-communist crusade? San
how do,
Francisco,
how do we
that
go from
Union town.
otters? How do we go to otters from otters to communism? It just,
I don't know. I don't know.
yeah.
It's the way they beat clams open with their with a rock on their
Yeah.
chest. You
All
know.
right, you've been communist. You've been communist.
That's
We're gonna
right.
beat it out of you. Beat it out
I've
of you.
seen them. Have you ever seen them when they try to hit a clam with a clam and
Yes,
it
I
does,
have.
and it
Yeah,
doesn't work? It doesn't work, and the guy realizes, oh, it doesn't. He tosses the clam, gets goes down and gets a rock. It's funny, man.
see, you have to be observing the otters for a long time to
Oh
see
no,
that.
I love it, man.
But
I
it's
have
great.
my
It's
favorite restaurants in
yeah,
Monterey. I like the pier because you could go out and get a seat right next to the rail and watch the otters. You
yeah,
know, and they're the seals and the otters. They occupy almost the same space on that same beach, right? You know,
yeah.
it's
I
really fun.
no, I love to watch the otters. I love to watch
Yeah,
the
me
otters.
too. What is that? I have an otter T-shirt and stuff. You know,
Well, we'll have to go. We'll have to go watch the otters together. All right,
we
Dan.
should do that.
All right, we'll do
They got
that.
good
All right.
food on that pier, man. There's
I
good food
know,
there.
I know. We'll find some vegan stuff. All
All
right,
right.
Dan.
All
Thank
right,
you.
man.
All right, there
Thank
he
you.
goes. There he goes. My friend Daniel Phil Gonzales, Asian American Studies professor, San Francisco State University. It's the College of Ethnic Studies, and we bring him in on Fridays to talk about stuff. And then we talk about a lot of stuff, like the Marcos thing. Could There could be a civil war in the Philippines between the warring families. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. It could happen. So we'll keep following that. We'll keep following that, and following the other things happening in the news. Well, I'm telling you, that Tom Cotton thing, when he grilled the head of TikTok, who's a Singaporean, saying, Your daughter is an American citizen. Are you thinking about becoming a citizen? No. Have you been a member of the Communist Party? The grilling of Asian Americans is coming. It's coming. All right. Have yourselves a good weekend. We'll be repeating this show. If you catch it on the repeat, it'll be illuminating. This is Emil, Amok's Takeout. My takes on all things considerable. We're here Monday through Friday in some form or fashion, generally live at 2 p.m. Pacific. We talk about stuff. We talk about news in the traditional news talk sense. We get up and we talk about the news and say, because I'm a newsman. I'm a newsman. And, this is our secret podcast. You can't get this on regular places where you podcast. We just pop up on YouTube at Emil Amok 1, on Twitter at Emil Amok, on Facebook at fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media. We just do our show. We record it. It's housed on YouTube. There it is. Catch it there. Once again, my shows. I do these shows, live, theatrical, one-man shows, in the Mike Daisy Spalding Gray vein, with a little stand-up thrown in there. I mean, there's some punchlines, mostly narrative-driven observations, but you can catch the shows coming up. Got some big shows coming up. And when I say big shows, I mean, there's a show. I'm part of the Rogue Festival in Fresno, March 2nd, Saturday, March 2nd at 2 p.m. and also 9:30 p.m. March 2nd. Sunday, March 3rd at 2 p.m. Thursday, March 7th at 5:30 p.m. and then March 9th, Saturday, March 9th at 5:30 p.m. That's at the Fresno Rogue Festival in the tradition of the Edinburgh Fringe, playing at the Lotus Room. Check out the roguefestival.org, FresnoRogueFestival.org for ticket information. Also, I'm in the New York City Fringe under St. Mark's, April 5th, Friday, April 5th at 9:50 p.m. Then Monday, April 8th, Saturday, April 13th, Friday, April 19th, Sunday, April 21st, 5 nights. And then I think doing a lot of comedy too. But that's at the Under St. Mark's, my 1 hour Emil Amok Lost NPR host, a wily Filipino. It's a new iteration of my one-man show. I think you'll like it. It's different. New arrangement. More jokes, funny jokes. And that's in April. And then in May, I'm at the Orlando Fringe Festival. So all those places. And in the meantime, I do this on the internet. We talk about the news. Thank you for being here. Like the airlines say, the airlines that fly with door bolts and those that fly without door bolts. They say, we know you have a choice. We know you have a choice to choose an airline that has door bolts and airlines that don't have door bolts. So thank you for being here. Really, I mean it. We like to practice meditation. Honest to God, it's helped. It's helped. Meditation and saffron helped. And so, loving kindness, show it to others. Show it first to others and it comes back, and then show it to yourself. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Ease. That's what we're looking for. We're always looking for ease. That's when you know you found it. It's easy. Enjoy the weekend. Listen to our show. The shows this week were good. 646, this 646, 645 was good. 644. We're all good. All good. Till next time. I'm Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Till next time. Mahal